Okay, yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out for our sponsors. We wanted to thank platform.sh, who is giving us the ability to have a Zoom meeting for more than 40 minutes, as well as we are going to be revamping our group website, and it will be hosted on their platform once we actually get the time to do that. And then we also want to thank Entrada for they are going to, there's some I'm blanking on the term right now, raffles that we're going to have at the end, and they are donating 3 $50 gift cards for that. So we give a shout out to them and appreciate them. And just remind you, like Sha UNIX said, they are hiring. So take a look at their careers page and see if you're interested. So I'll go ahead and now turn the time over to Ski. Have you go ahead and do your introductions, and then you can go into your presentation from there.
Okay, thank you. Long story short, I've been at this a while, and I'm roaming through the internet a month ago, and I bump into this group and got excited about it. Had a great presentation by Larry Garfield last month, if you recall. And so one of his slides struck a chord, and you'll see that in a minute. But Tom and I go back about 8 or 9 years, Tom Monteleone. We got excited about the iPad. We created digital magazines back in 2012. We had one of our clients run 60 months every month, month in and month out, for 60 months on the iPad. We added Android, Nook, and Kindle platforms. So done a little bit of everything. And my last vacation, I cannot recall. We were supposed to go to Hilton Head Island, South Carolina last March, and it obviously got canceled, and we're rescheduled for April. So let's get started here. Yes, and there's a note in the, I guess, the chat that you can get a free copy of my book, Purple Curve Effect. There's also some audio clips there from a cable TV show that I did when my book came out back in April of 2004. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great. So Tom and I faced a very difficult task when we launched our business. It's called Agile Audio Dashboards. And Tom has partners in other adventures. I have partners in other adventures. We're both what some might call senior citizens, but we try not to let that get in our way. But in February of 2018, we launched Agile Audio Dashboards. And what we found out was most of the Alexa skills were at that time written in node.js. And if you ever tried to find a node.js programmer, especially in early 2018, it was a bit of a challenge. So in the beginning, we created this business, and in October of 2017, actually prior to us incorporating, we were invited to a pitch contest, and we had to have 5 slides for it. And the project name, as we were rolling this out, was Affiance. And we were preaching this thing called Agile Audio Dashboards, which we then adopted for the company name. And a little bit of what we were trying to solve. We thought there was a great market potential. And so we shared the audience what we were doing. We offered them some free stuff. We wanted to basically get them to participate with us and sign people up. We were in beta at the time. We had some demos for them. And at that time we were asking, hey, we want you to be a user, try this stuff out.
Hey, Ski,
We were looking for, yes.
can you slow down on your slides? You've got a lot of information there, and I'm not making it all the way through the slides.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
You will get the slide deck at the end of this. So, but I will slow down. I typically use the slides just as reminders, but, and again, this is from October of 2017, just to set some background for how we ended up creating Alexa skills in PHP. And that link, that domain's no longer valid, and that link's no longer valid. So let's fast forward to a month ago. And last month, Larry was speaking, and he was sharing, among the things he touched on was PHP 8 and had a lot of insight. I don't really follow it that closely. I'm more in the sales and marketing aspect today. As I mentioned last month, I started developing in PHP in 1997. I started coding in 79, if I recall. I was at Kent State University, getting a degree in business management technology, and I took all my related in computer programming. So it was an intro to BASIC. Then I had several COBOL classes, if anybody remembers that. But I really enjoyed Larry's presentation, but there was a slide that hit me right between the eyes. And it's this slide that he shared from the Mythical Man Month book. And it says, the most radical possible solution for constructing software is not to construct it at all. That is brilliant on several levels. And it is the heart of what I've been doing since 1992. I met a gentleman, the late Dr. Ellie Goldratt, in something called the theory of constraints. So when I see somebody talk about constraints, I pay attention. And so that kind of powered me to reach out and offer to speak. So as my buddy Max Headroom says, let's jump 20 minutes into the future. As I mentioned, we're big on Alexa. Now, how many of you knew that on Amazon.com, you have the ability to limit your search to just Alexa skills? And that's been there for several years that I know of. This is a really cool feature. And if I could, let me pitch you on Alexa for a moment. You don't have to buy a device because it will run. Today, it wasn't always true, but today it runs just as well on my iOS phone, my Android phone, my iPad. So you can run Alexa. And I've now got to the point where I use Siri just long enough to get her to open the Alexa app so that I can get some work done. But a cool unknown feature. And one of the skills, this thing from Ohio Wines, is one of our skills written in PHP. So here's the magic slide. Here's the secret sauce, an overview of our technology model for a number of skills that use the PHP language. I'm a big fan of the Venn diagram, as you can tell. So up in the upper right-hand corner, we have an echo dot. And between Tom and I, we own almost every Alexa device Amazon has made. But don't tell our wives. I love my dot, but my favorite one is actually the Fire TV Cube. It's a device, but it controls my big screen TV and has an optical interface for other devices. But here's the way an Alexa skill works. You say, for example, we have a skill called, if you say, Alexa, launch contact ski man. That's a skill that will actually get your mobile number and send you a link how we can connect. And the way that works is the Echo in your home or on your device, wherever you're at in the world, through the internet talks to Amazon's AWS or AVS, which is Amazon's voice services. And it says, hey, somebody's asking me to do something. And the key here are endpoints. So AWS then talks to an endpoint in PHP or vice versa, and they communicate. And one of the things that when we were creating this skill, we found a subcontractor to help with it, and they had a framework. And they said, by the way, and I mentioned this last month, they said, well, if you want to use PHP, you have to have a host that's fast enough, because AWS will throw you out of the boat if you don't respond quickly enough. So we hosted with WP Engine. And as I mentioned, they have a caching protocol that's extremely fast. And so this developer that we hired said, by the way, we just use WordPress as this back office automation tool. It makes it easy to get in and configure new skills. So actually the first skill that Tom and I rolled out was for one of his longtime clients, Wayne County in Ohio, which is where the city of Worcester is located. We basically pitched them on the idea of them having an Alexa skill. And so we created this first one with this subcontractor using PHP, the WP engine. And then it was very easy when we added Ohio Wines, which was a very similar use case. We just go into WordPress and basically cloned a few things. And so that's the secret sauce. Is there any questions, any comments, anything I can, if this isn't clear enough, I can help maybe make it more clear? I'll take it that's a no. Okay, and by the way, I just pulled up, some of the files that for a backdrop here. So anybody out there on a Macintosh still using TextMate? That's my favorite editor. Forever, I was using BB Edit on the Apple platform, but I've been on TextMate since version 1.0. It's now 2.0.19, I think is the stable version. But here's just a sample code of the PHP that's running again on WP Engine. So let me tell you how we got here and why this is important. There's this thing that Dr. Goldratt came up with called the theory of constraints. We call it TOC. And what he said is basically constraints exist and you have to take them into consideration, whether you're building a company, a startup, a block of code, an application, a mobile app. You have to understand there are constraints. Now, I've been in and around Agile to some extent, and the best one sentence description I've heard for Agile is it's a mindset. There's a lot of resistance of calling it a methodology or a framework, but in my mind, it seeks to serve many of the same problems that I've used TOC for, and I used it in the manufacturing environment first, in accounting and a number of other areas before I used it in software development. And what I find is, in my mind, they're interchangeable. So if you're excited about Agile, great. If you're excited about TOC, great. They both provide a mechanism, a mindset to create great code. So what Goldratt said is a number of people have trouble understanding how simple TOC is. And so he defined what we call the infamous P and Q example. What it is, it's an example set in the manufacturing world. And this is an example spreadsheet that I created to help teach people. And by the way, it's also, I think, chapter 27 in my book. So you'll get the whole explanation of what the P&Q example is and why it's important. And then I went on a number of years ago to actually create an iPhone app, an iOS app, to actually do this same spreadsheet example, but on an iOS device. But here's the simple explanation. You are a manager, you're a leader in a company, and your company makes two products. Now, maybe it's two software products, maybe it's two physical goods, maybe it doesn't matter what it is, but you've got one called P and one called Q. And the market has so much demand for these two products. And so what Goldratt did is he defined this example in such a manner that it makes it obvious to most people, because there's a decision to make. You don't have enough time. If you can see, I don't know if the screen's big enough on your end, but there are some flags on the right side in purple. And what we find is this worker named Bubba has a rate error. And one of the parameters, this company has certain rules and regulations, no overtime, et cetera. And so what he's trying to show is this mix, how many P you make versus how many Q you make, because you don't have enough production capacity to supply all the demand. Okay. There's not enough time to do all the great projects that we'd want to as software developers. So that's kind of what this is representing. And so it's a profit loss exercise. If we could make all the products to meet all the demand, we might make $1,500. I think it's a month. I forget now. That's not labeled. It might be a week. I think it's a week. Yeah, it's a 40-hour week. So $1,500 a week. But you've got an error. You can't do that. So I'm not going to step everybody through it because it really takes about 30 minutes for you to work out and do the math. But the conclusion at the end of it is, because there's a constraint, in this case, Bubba can only go so fast, and we've got this resource, it might not be a person, it might be, an application, it might be a cloud-based solution, whatever, it doesn't matter. Because of constraint, we have to adjust the rest of the business around these things called constraints. So I said all that to say, Tom and I found out in 2018, there were no node.js programmers. So Tom's a Python programmer. He actually teaches Python at the College of Worcester in Ohio. And so you can write Alexa skills in Python. So we say, great, let's find some Python programmers and let's write some skills for Alexa in Python. Well, guess what? That didn't work out well for us either. I don't know how many interns we went through, but the only subcontractor that really hit the ball out of the park was this gentleman that did the PHP. So that's a constraint we found. And we said, look, we can find PHP programmers everywhere. So we were in the process of reorganizing our business around the fact that we were going to develop all of our skills in Alexa in PHP. But on the way to the forum, an interesting thing happened. We came up with this idea to create a killer skill for voice. I think everyone's heard of SurveyMonkey. Well, we created a voice survey product that's like SurveyMonkey, but for voice. And we did a joint venture with another company out of Columbus, Ohio. And so we pushed most things aside and spent a lot of time on this thing. And it's called, today it's actually an engine in the background and it runs a lot of different processes. So the long story short is, when you're handed lemons, you have to make lemonade. And that's what Tom and I learned. There's PHP programmers everywhere. And if we were still developing skills, I'm convinced we'd still be developing them in PHP because it just works. As I told you a month ago, I created my first distributed web database in 1997 with PHP version 3 and MySQL version 3. So that's kind of the long and short of it. There's a link to my book where I talk about this is my book, Purple Curve Effect. It's my implementation of the late Dr. Ellie Goldrat's theory of constraints. And one of the pivots I've made last year was into the voice first career. This is where I try to find people jobs in the voice first space or find hiring managers talent in the voice first space. I mentioned the skill contact ski man that'll run on over 200 million Alexa devices on all kinds of devices. All you have to do is say, Alexa, launch contact ski man, and it'll hook you up with me. One of the other things I'm working on is this thing called Double Sales Club, where I use the theory of constraints to come into a business and help them double their sales in as little as 90 days. And I've got another voice first product that Tom and I resell for another company called Pound 250. They call it speed dial for mobile. I don't think that drives home the point. In the 48 lower states, anywhere in the lower 48 states, you can pick up your mobile phone, dial Pound 250 and say double sales, and it'll put you right through to my voicemail and I'll follow up with you. So not necessarily all about PHP programming, but it's been an important part of my life, Tom's life. And that's kind of what we've done and how we've morphed using in many times this great idea of the theory of constraints. So that's pretty much it. I'll be happy to take any questions. And let me see, how do I get back to Zoom? I'll stop. There we go. Questions? By the way, Tom, do you want to add anything that I maybe glossed over?
No, I think you covered most of it, and I apologize for taking my camera off. My internet connection is unstable, so I dropped out for a couple of minutes, and I don't want to chance that happening again. No, I think you covered most of it with Alexa. Jeff may have mentioned this or not, but when we first got started, I think there were 25 to 35,000 Alexa skills. Most of them were hello world. There are a lot more of them now, but still I would say the majority of them are probably really just introductory skills people are trying. And the only other thing I will mention is that if you follow Mark Cuban at all on Twitter or anywhere else, he is basically singing to the rafters, telling you if you need to make money, especially as a beginning person, the thing to do is to learn how to do skills on Alexa and really on the other smart speakers as well. And the beauty with Alexa is you can have any kind of a back end you want, even if you have to have the middleware developed in a different language. Your back-end database, and that's what I use for all the database stuff I do. It's all PHP, all MySQL, and it just works. It's fast enough, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and we actually helped our client win an award. Wayne County CVB won the 2018 Ohio Magazine Innovation in Travel Marketing for their Alexa skill, again, built with PHP. So questions?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yes.
You talked about several different languages that you can build Alexa skills with, and I was kind of expecting to see more architecture. So instead, can you tell us more about what it takes to build an Alexa skill? Since it can be done in any language, what does Amazon look for?
Well, Amazon's got a slightly different approval process than Apple does. Apple has this look and feel approach, if you will. If an iOS app doesn't look and feel like they think an iOS app should, they won't approve it. Amazon's entirely different, and it's still much like a wild, wild west. You could have 100 people with the same exact, what we call invocation name. So the first thing you do when you build a skill, like the one I told you about, launch contact ski man, contact ski man is the invocation name. That's how you identify it from what are literally now hundreds of thousands of skills out there. Launch is a keyword that's part of the Alexa ecosystem, if you will. So the first thing you do is you go into an Alexa dashboard and you say, I want to build a skill. And then once you set up some parameters, like what's it going to do? Is it going to ask, like my skill asks for your mobile number? That's the only question that I need in order to contact you. And we actually use Twilio. Tom's been using Twilio 10 or 12 years. I've been using it 9 or 10 years. We actually use Twilio to send a text message when you contact me. But within the Alexa dashboard, you say, I want to build a skill. I want to ask them their name, maybe their age. If you're doing a restaurant skill, what kind of food groups. So you set up these parameters. And again, like a lot of places, they've redefined terms that you and I know and used for years and years and years. A variable is not a variable in the Alexa world. Tom, what's it called again? My mind just went blank. There's an intent that, hey, I want Mexican restaurants, but then a variable has another name. But you build this and you do it in JSON. You can do it in raw JSON, or you can use one of their menu tools. But you build the intent.
Slots?
Pardon?
Slots?
Slots. Thank you. Slots are values or variables. So that's step A. You give it a name, contact ski man. You want to grab the mobile number. And then what you do is you switch over to AWS and put a back end on the skill. If you remember the diagram I showed you with the Venn diagrams, the AWS platform has the endpoints. So when you build the Alexa skill, it's kind of a hollow shell without endpoints. So you go into AWS and say, I want to use Python. Great. Now you write the hard code to make it handle variables or slots, handle intents, because within the AWS engine, it's the thing that's actually listening when somebody's Alexa device invokes it. So once you create a skill, the back end, if you will, the black box, and AWS supported at one time Java. I'm not sure how many now, but Java, I heard they either did or will add Go. It does Python, PHP, node.js, and several others. So whatever language you want to write the black box in, you can. And once you finish that process, it gives you an endpoint. Now you go back to the dashboard of the Alexa skill. And again, there's two separate entities. You go to the dashboard, you say, okay, here's my endpoint that this process I built, this intent with these slots, this is where you talk to it and the code happens. So you then have to test it and submit it for approval. Now, the approval also takes a week or so the first time. As you submit more and more skills, it goes much faster. But they're looking, does it work? And does it, not violate trademarks? They're looking more from that perspective. And then if they, and by the way, the minute you write the skill, you can test it on your own device, which is really handy. And they've got some debugging tools. There were almost none 3 years ago. They've come a long way. But you've got some debugging tools, but you can test it right away on your own device. And you can send, kind of like test flight on the iOS environment, you can send links to people to test it, like your clients. So does that help answer your question?
Yeah, if I could add,
Yeah.
If you go to developer.amazon.com, you can sign up. If you already have an Amazon account, that's all you need to sign up. And
Yes.
basically, they can take you through various ways of building skills, some of which are a little bit simpler, using blueprints than others. The things that we concentrated on, Ski already talked about an invocation name and the fact that you can have multiple skills that have the exact same invocation name. So even though you're the first pizza on the block or business on the block, it doesn't mean that when people ask Echo for, launch business, that they're going to find yours. It's basically the wild, wild west, and whoever is the most popular is where Alexa is going to go. Similar to the way, and there is no search engine per se on Alexa that is similar to what you get on Google. So while the invocation name is important, it's more important that the skill works and works well. It then gets broken down really into what are intents, and intents, you can think of it as if we're going back to just a procedure or a method that you're calling. You have to provide Alexa with samples. When I'm calling this, what do I expect to get back? So if you're just asking one question and it has a limited set of answers, what state do you want to hear more about? You can tell Alaska, Alabama, New York, New Jersey, whatever. However, the more samples you can give as to how people ask the question, tell me more about, this state, that state, or the other, more likely that the skill is interpreted correctly and the end user will get a better experience. And yeah, you do use slots, and there are different types of slots that you can use. Are we looking for a date? Are we looking for a state? Are we looking for a proper name? Are we looking for a word, a vocabulary word? And Alexa will interpret what you put in the question and try to find the best intent that matches it within your skill. Again, you have to get into your skill. At that point, you build a model. Really, what you're doing is compiling all the bits and pieces and parts. If your skill requires you to go out and get data, that's where you have to have a valid endpoint, and it has to be on a SSL. Have an SSL connection. And then finally, you do allow people to beta test it. You're allowed, I think, up to 100 people to beta test for a period. It may be as long as 90 days now. I think initially it was 30. I'm not sure. You'd have to check that. If you are going to use Amazon to host your skill, I believe it can only be written in Python or node.js. If you're hosting the skill somewhere else on your own server, you can pretty much write it in whatever you need to. But you have to, it has its own markup language to tell it, say this, or this is a question. If you don't get an answer within 10 seconds, ask it again, ask it a different way. What are you going to show, if anything? Some of the devices have screens. Some of them have and I don't know, Ski, if you have one of your small devices there, but it's about 2.5 or 3 inches wide, just a round circle, very small screen. Others, you can go up to your big screen TV. You can also use the Amazon tablets are actually just Android tablets, but with Alexa built in, and they're relatively inexpensive. I think I paid $50 for a 70-inch and maybe $59 for a 9 or an 11-inch. I don't remember exactly. So it's once you start getting in, there is a learning curve. There are third-party generators for the skills if you want to use them. Jovo, Jovo, and I forget it's not jovo.com, it's Jovo.
I think it's jovo.org.
Okay. Jovo. I think Jovo, is it jovo.org? I thought it was jovo.tech, but I'm always.
Yeah.
Yeah, jovo.tech.
If we wanted to get into we'd be happy to. One of the things we did was we wrote a hello world skill for Alexa to actually document all these pieces. So we've done classes on programming in Alexa. I didn't think we were going to go that deep in it, but that's something we could do maybe at a later date. Other questions? Last thing I'd say is what Tom and I found out is the only money to be made in Alexa skills today, in our opinion, and we've presented around the country at different events, is the B2B space. It's almost impossible to make money pitching to consumers because there just isn't any uniformity. They don't know about it. There's no good search engine for it. It's just been, and Amazon's been rethinking it almost from day one, because almost every example you see is, a B2C example, but you can't make money in that space. In fact, I actually coined the phrase Alexa for Business in September 2017. On October 30th, 2017, Amazon announced this program called Alexa for Business. And what they did is they started setting up value-added resellers to go implement 50 or 100 or 1,000 Alexa devices in your business. So they kind of cherry-picked the B2B arena that made the most money. So
yeah, this is something that Ski and I disagree on, because I think business to consumers actually is ripe. If you have a good web presence and you can drive people to your Alexa skills so they don't have to find it, but if you can tell them, how to launch it. I mean, you look at a lot of the stuff with relaxation techniques and white noise and those kinds of things. People are making money with it, but it's few and far between. The people who wrote the Jeopardy skill are making money with that one. So there are some of them, but
that's one.
Yeah, there the exceptions to the rule. There's more than one. But
you
and I will agree to disagree on this. But
the other big one is something called Big Sky. The terminology is if Amazon created a skill, we call it a first party skill. If anybody else creates it, it's a third party skill. So there's a weather skill built into Alexa that's rudimentary. Well, I think it was a high school teacher wanted to sit down and learn how to program it and try to do some good. So he created a weather app called Big Sky, and he has a subscription model. So it does like 10 times the amount of work of results that Amazon's does, 10 times for free. But if you pay a subscription model, you'll get like 100 times the amount of information. It is just so over the top. he's, the second case of somebody making money in the B2C space. But I know we're kind of tight on time, but happy to answer any other questions. Okay, I guess I'll turn it back.
All right, thanks, Ski.
Yep.
I remembered as we were in the presentation, I neglected to mention one of our sponsors, which is JetBrains. We as part of the raffle, we will be raffling off a 1-year subscription to one of their software products, which I really like JetBrains. I really like the stuff they build. So so yeah, so I guess we'll just go ahead and go into the raffle part.